In 1986, the picturesque farming town of Ellensburg, Washington, became home to Steve Johnson, the new pastor at a local church, and his wife Pam, a registered nurse. But within a year, their idyllic life would be shattered by a vicious crime, and it would take a miracle to put their family back together. It was the day after the Johnsons had moved into their newly purchased fixer-upper that their nightmare began. Their two children, Brian 6 and Teresa 2.5, were playing outside while their parents were inside getting settled.
I was in one of the rooms unpacking boxes, and suddenly I could hear a sound from my son that meant that he was distressed, and I ran to meet him. He came through the screen door.
Brian, honey, what's the matter?
And he said, "Mommy, a boy has taken Teresa." And my world stopped.
Brian's words sent a chill through Pam's heart.
Teresa! Teresa! Teresa!
Teresa had been kidnapped.
Teresa!
Pam's husband, Steve, was in the basement when he heard her desperate cries.
Immediately, there was a bolt of adrenaline that rushed through my body. I was just determined, I've got to find my daughter.
Within minutes, Steve was in the car with Brian, frantically searching for Teresa, but the girl was nowhere to be found.
See her?
Go and call the police.
All right.
Since their home phone had not been installed, Steve and Pam turned to their neighbors for help.
Somebody's taken my daughter off of my porch. She's been abducted. Can I use your phone?
I began going door to door, meeting my neighbors for the first time and pounding on the door and said, "Our daughter's just been abducted."
But no one had seen anything, and precious time was slipping away. Soon, dozens of people were scouring the neighborhood, looking for any trace of the missing girl. Teresa had been gone now for almost 30 minutes, and with each new minute that ticked by, the hopes of finding her alive grew slimmer and slimmer.
I was just sitting there thinking about the miracle of conceiving my daughter, and yet here, in 2.5 years, there was a possibility that I would never see her again.
At last the call came in. Teresa had been found. Scott Hammond, a local paramedic, was the first to receive the news, but it wasn't good.
Civilians from the neighborhood actually discovered her under the road in the culvert under the water. They looked down past the grate and they saw something that didn't look right.
Teresa had been assaulted. She was found submerged, her tiny body weighed down with concrete blocks. Teresa had been underwater for at least 30 minutes, possibly 40. Her color was ashen grey, and she had no vital signs. By all medical accounts, Teresa was dead.
When you look in someone's eyes, you can tell if there's anyone there or not. And there was no one there when I examined Teresa's eyes in the process of working her up in the ambulance on the way to the hospital.
Teresa was rushed to the nearby Kittitas Valley Community Hospital where her parents had just arrived.
We're going to take her straight up to CCU.
Being a nurse, you get used to seeing people that are near death and people that have died, and what the chances are for them to return. And I knew that Teresa was dead.
Then for the Johnsons, the wait began. The excruciating wait for the news no parent ever wants to hear. As they waited, more and more people, both friends and strangers, arrived at the hospital. They rallied their inner strength and community spirit behind the lifeless little girl in the adjoining room, and along with Pam and Steve, they prayed for a miracle. As they prayed, the emergency team was frantically trying to revive Teresa. Refusing to give up hope, they did everything medically possible to get her heart beating again.
Everybody clear!
Clear.
And then, something miraculous occurred.
We got a rhythm? Great. Check pulse.
1 full hour after she had been pulled from the water, Teresa's still heart began to beat with life. Scott emerged from the ER to give the Johnsons the incredible news.
She's regained her own heartbeat at this time, and she's got a good blood pressure and good cardiac function. She's trying to take a few breaths on her own. Okay. Okay. So something's happening. Still don't know about level of consciousness, but something's happening. Something's happening.
Thanks, God.
Teresa was alive, but barely. Still unconscious, she was airlifted to Children's Hospital in Seattle, where doctors gave her a 50-50 chance of staying alive, but little chance at all of having normal brain function.
I couldn't stand for that. I believed that God had begun a miracle and that God was going to complete a miracle.
Amazingly, Steve's faith in a second miracle for Teresa proved true. She awoke the next morning, recovered steadily for the next 6 weeks, and was released from the hospital. And today she's a completely healthy, vivacious young woman.
I'm 13 now, and I like singing. Not that good at sports. I played piano, and I like to read a lot.
I do believe this was a miracle, and I believe it was a miracle because Teresa was truly dead. The statistics are all there. And she came back, and she came back completely.
The Johnsons have finally recovered from their terrifying ordeal. And when they think back on that day,
Teresa!
their anguish is overshadowed by warm, lasting memories of how their community rallied its strength and undying faith for one little girl, of a medical miracle that defied explanation, and of the joyful news that brought a family back together. Today, when Pam and Steve Johnson look at their children, they know their prayers were answered when little Teresa was literally brought back to life.